Andrew Choi. Andrew's gonna lead us in a pule for tonight.
Mahalo, Jared. Actually, I see a familiar face online, and I was wondering, and if you don't want to do it, Auntie Kanani, would you mind doing a quick pule for us? If not, I can do it. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay.
Mahalo.
Oh. Kia ko manalo, we thank thee for every opportunity we have to meet and discuss items that can be of benefit to all of our ohana, all of our Hawaiian homelands ohana. We are thankful for our good health and for the opportunity to meet, and we ask for that continued guidance as we share information and glean, and hopefully everything will be to our advantage and will be pono. And we ask these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mahalo, Auntie, for the pule. I'll turn it back over to Jared.
You're muted, Jared.
Too excited to get started, sorry. Okay, so here we go again. Aloha, everybody. Welcome to round 2, part 3 of our beneficiary consultation for the DHHL General Plan Update. I'm Jared Chang from SSFM. I'll be tonight's facilitator. One quick note, you might have saw the thing pop up. We are recording these meetings to be posted to the Project Open House website. So let's get started. On this slide, you'll see tonight's agenda. We'll introduce the DHHL staff. Our team from SSFM covers some meeting Kuleana. Then we'll give a quick update of where we stand in the overall process for the general plan update and what's been completed to date. Then we'll jump right into tonight's topics on healthy communities, natural and cultural resources, and close with a quick wrap up and next steps. So here's a shot of the planning teams from DHHL and SSFM. You heard Andrew open our meeting. He's the acting planning program manager at DHHL. He's supported by Julianne Cachola. I'm Jared. Melissa May is with us tonight. She's our project manager at SSFM and a senior planner. And we also have Malachi Krishak, one of our planners at SSFM. This is the team that's working on the update. Okay, pretty easy. Kuleana for tonight's meeting includes being respectful and showing aloha by not interrupting. Also try to keep yourself muted when not talking. Sometimes we get some background noise and I will mute you myself, so please don't take offense to that. When you want to speak, please raise your hand using the Zoom function and wait on me to call on you first before you unmute and start speaking. And there will also be times when we must agree to disagree, and we all have different perspectives and opinions. And finally, we just are encouraging everybody to have an open mind tonight. Be open to any new information or new ideas shared. Okay, on this next slide, just gonna do a quick tutorial on how to use Zoom. So starting on the left side there, you see a microphone icon. That's how you mute and unmute yourself. To the right of that is the video icon. We encourage everyone to turn on your cameras. We'd like to see everybody if possible. In the center of the screen is the chat box function. So you can click on the chat icon. It'll open up the chat box. Feel free to write your ideas or questions in that chat box. If we don't get to it, we will do our best to try and get through the chat boxes, but sometimes we can't get to all of it. And then next to that is the reactions button. That's what you open that up, and that's how you click on the raise your hand function. I'll see it on your video screen, and then I'll be prompted to call on you. Just remember to lower your hand also after you've spoken. All right, I'm gonna ask everybody to loosen up those fingers right now. And we wanna get everybody onto our Mentimeter polling website right now. So go to www.mentee.com. Malachi is going to post a link in the chat to make it easy for you. So you just click on that link. We want everybody to get in there, enter the code for tonight, 81072466. And then at the first question, we just want everybody to check in kind of, so we know where you are joining us from, what is your beneficiary status and location, and your name. And then leave it open because we're going to be using Mentee quite a bit the rest of the meeting. So let's do that. Malachi is also going to post a code into the chat. Okay, great. If you have any questions on this or any problems, go ahead and enter into the chat. Okay, so far we got 2 people that answered up to the 3rd question. Where you're joining us from. Ho'olehua, Honolulu, Kalavahine, Streamside. Great. Okay. Let's move into the next slide, Malachi, for the purpose, and then maybe check the Mentee right at the end before you start again, possibly. Okay, purpose of tonight's meeting, pretty easy. Provide an update to you guys. Then jump right into discussing existing conditions, land use designations, and future policies for our 2 topics. So healthy communities and natural and cultural resource management. And absolutely the most important thing for us tonight is to hear your mana'o on policies and metrics that we're presenting tonight to be included into the plan. So most importantly for us is to listen. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick where we are in the process. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a graphic showing the different plans that make up the DHHL planning system. The general plan at the very top there is in tier 1. So the general plan serves as a 20-year guiding document that identifies the vision, the long-term goals and priorities for DHHL and the Hawaiian Homes Commission. As represented in this graphic, the general plan sets the policy direction for all of the other DHHL plans that come below it, as well as funding, legislative, and land use priorities. And as part of the general plan update for right now, we are also building into it an evaluation program with the purpose is to update and monitor success of the plan, monitor success of the plan and its policies over time. Okay, next slide. So in this general plan update, these are the goals generally. So to set the vision and policies to guide the department for the next 20 years, that's the first one. The second one is the update must also meet requirements set forth in Hawaii Administrative Rules, Title 10, Chapter 4, Section 55. I'll go over those in the next slide. The updated plan should also strive to be innovative and pragmatic to assist the department, the commission, beneficiaries, and decision makers. And finally, the plan will identify how to measure success and progress toward the vision and goals. Okay, these are the minimum general plan requirements identified in Hawaii Administrative Rules. We have a kind of a quick legend here to identify the general topics for each requirement. So in the first 2, there's a green box around them. The green box is related to creating a uniform system of land use designations and land dispositions across the state. The gold kind of brown box, the next 4, 3 through 6, this is related to establishing criteria for identifying homestead lands, non-homesteading lands, lands for revenue generation, and lands for community use. Number 7 there, the blue box is related to establishing level of service standards for infrastructure and community facilities. And finally, the last box, the purple box, number 8, relates to the need for an evaluation program to measure success. Tonight, we're really going to be talking about actually focusing on numbers 4, 6, and 8, just as a FYI. Okay, this slide is an overview of our project schedule. As you can see, it's approximately a 2-year process, which started in 2020. We started with some stakeholder interviews, background research, and analysis of the existing policies. In March and April of last year, 2021, we completed the first round of beneficiary consultation. That was primarily to establish the plan's vision statement for the year 2040. And tonight, like we said, we're in the third part of round 2 of beneficiary consultation. We hope to have the third round and final round of consultation in the May-June timeframe of this year, and to get to a final plan by the end of 2022. Just a recap on the current round 2 beneficiary meetings. We are exploring each topic that will be covered in the general plan update. And we're trying to give as much opportunity to get input from everybody, from the beneficiaries, on the goals and policies for each topic. So we have planned 4 sets of meetings in round 2. We already completed 2 parts in November and December. And now we're on the third part. Tonight was the second of 2 meetings. We had about 300 people participate in round 1. You can find those meeting summaries and videos of those video recordings of those on the Project Open House website. We'll post a link in the chat for that too. In parts 1 and 2 of this round, we have engaged with about 190 people so far, so 190 beneficiaries. Tonight's meeting, like we said, will focus on healthy communities and natural and cultural resource management. And the next and final meeting in this part, round 2, will focus on revenue generation and economic development. Okay, I'm going to go over the general plan vision statement that we established at the end of round 1. So, round 1. The general plan is a vision-based document. And in our first round of consultation, we asked beneficiaries to describe what success would look like in 20 years if the vision was achieved, and what principles would be needed to get us there. The overarching theme that came out of it is self-sufficiency. We also have the vision statement available on the Open House website in its entirety, but on this slide, I'm just summarizing it. So, in the year 2040, the Hawaiian Homelands Trust and its beneficiaries will be thriving, self-sufficient, and connected to one another and the Aina. Trust lands will be able to nurture and sustain beneficiary communities. There's a need for beneficiary communities to be self-sufficient, healthy, prosperous, and grounded in cultural knowledge and traditions. There's a need for beneficiaries to be thriving on the land and engaged in activities that support the rehabilitation and self-determination of all Hawaiians. There's a need for DHHL to be sufficiently funded, transparent with beneficiaries, and collaborative towards achieving the vision. And finally, a need for all of Hawaii to support the implementation of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So we cover this every meeting because it's important to keep this vision statement in mind as we discuss policies and goals and objectives in each of these meetings. That was the end of the updates for the project. Can we check out the Mentee really quick? Okay, we got 14 guys. About half of the group is in Mentee. 6 lessees, 6 on the wait list, 1 undivided interest, and 1 other. Great. Where is everybody calling in from? Okay, Kahiki Nui. Oh, North Carolina, Anahola, Big Island. Okay, great. Let's move on. We have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to Malachi, and he's going to get us started with the Healthy Communities discussion.
Hey, mahalo, Jared. Let's get started. My name is Malachi Krisha. I'm a planner with SSFM International. And this first policy topic that we're going to talk about tonight is healthy communities on Hawaiian homelands. So what makes a healthy community? We're going to get a chance to talk about that all together in a few slides. We'll open up a discussion to talk about what a healthy community means to you. But before we do that, I just wanted to share first some background information, as well as to also talk about why we're including it in this general plan update. So we can start with, since this is a general plan, we'll start with the American Planning Associations, who defines healthy communities as places where all individuals have access to healthy built, social, economic, and natural environments that provide them with the opportunity to live their life to the fullest potential. Sorry, I stutter sometimes. So when we get into talking about what healthy communities mean on Hawaiian homelands, we might think of them as places that strengthen connections, that build community self-sufficiency, places that promote physical and mental well-being, that strengthen cultural identity, that protect and malama aina. Or communities could be, a healthy community would mean that, people are encouraged to participate and relationships are strengthened and grow in those communities too. Healthy communities is included as a policy topic in this general plan update in order to really identify what support communities need to be self-sufficient, to be healthy, prosperous, grounded in cultural knowledge and traditions. So when we get to the goals and policies that are proposed for this general plan, which we'll talk about later on in these slides, those will be what guides DHHL's programming. Those will be what, and the potential partnerships that the department seeks out in order to support those needs. So some more information just to feed our minds before we get into a group discussion. But so in Hawaii, there are many groups and practitioners who are working to help build and sustain healthy communities and wellness in Hawaii. But they're also helping to share indigenous Native Hawaiian models for health and well-being. So we just wanted to share these two examples here, which show that health and well-being are really about, growing connections, strengthening those connections. Connections to yourself, connections to place, connections to others, connections to the past, to the future, to your ancestors, to future generations. We just wanted to share this because I think it really aligns with Prince Kuhio's intention with the Hawaiian Homelands Program, which is really grounded in the initial idea of reconnecting Hawaiians with the land, and then all of those other connections that grow and sustain through that initial connection with the land, reconnection with the land. And more recently, health and well-being have been talked about more in terms of resilience. So on the left-hand side here, the city and county of Honolulu has a resilience strategy, and they define resilience as the ability to survive, adapt, thrive, regardless of the shocks and stresses that come your way. So they kind of frame it in terms of events and being prepared. But there are also the definitions out there that bring in an indigenous perspective. And the example below comes from Australia. And this example really talks about resilience in terms of individuals, communities, and environment, and that connection of adapting and being resilient all together in a connected way. And then on the right-hand side, I just wanted to share that the County of Hawaii has been doing a lot of work around resilience. This is just an example to show kind of the various, what they call capacity areas, but the various aspects and components that make up resilient communities. So in their framework, they include promoting social well-being, through social connectedness, providing social services, education, recreation, those types of things, nurturing and sustaining culture, cultural practices, cultural knowledge, values, identity, those types of things. They also include developing and strengthening economic well-being, financial well-being, economic development. They include the built environment. Effective, resilient housing, buildings, engineering that takes into account climate change and the changes to the environment, and planning that takes into those things as well. It takes into consideration those things as well. They include youth, so encouraging youth, future generations to be involved, uplift their voices, be represented in the community conversations. And then lastly, of course, managing, taking care of the natural environment, which we'll talk about in the next section of this presentation. So for this general plan update process, we want to focus on how DHHL can support healthy communities on trust lands. So one specific way is through land use. And if you attended the previous meetings of this round, you'll remember that we talked about land use designations and how they provide the department with kind of a set of options and rules about where specific uses and activities or projects might be allowed on trust lands. So for uses related to healthy communities, the land use designations that would usually support those types of activities would fall under these two. So the first one is community use, which is an existing land use designation in the department. And those are, for common areas, for community uses and public facilities that might include things like parks, recreation spaces, space for cultural activities, community economic development, or other kind of facilities and amenities within a community. And then we're also proposing a new land use designation specifically for community agriculture. So these would be common areas that are used for specifically for cultivation of fruits, vegetables, plants, flowers, herbs, etc. And they would be shared spaces for multiple users to conduct these activities on in a public way. So we're separating out because this land use for agriculture, the needs and infrastructure aren't necessarily the same as like a community center, like a building or something like that. So we're gonna have them separate here is what we're proposing. And this slide, we just have some examples of uses that support healthy communities, which are currently located on Hawaiian homeland. So you can see kind of the range. There's in some communities healthcare. There's child care and education facilities. There's also healthcare and wellness services, space for cemeteries on community use lands, public safety and social services, like fire departments. There's also places for the community to gather, like parks and community centers. And then some homestead associations also utilize community use lands for economic development activities, community economic activities as well. And DHHL also has the ability to support healthy communities through its programming. And these are just a few related policies and programs that have continued or have changed since the last general plan that was adopted in 2002. So the first one here is the Beneficiary Consultation policy adopted in 2009. And it's kind of encouraged through the policies of the last general plan, but it was adopted as administrative rules to give communities and beneficiaries more of a voice in the projects and activities that affect their communities. There's also been an emphasis of late in providing more access to land and also capacity building support to organizations that are doing work supporting self-sufficiency on Hawaiian homelands. And then of course, there's a Native Hawaiian Development Program, which was established in 2001, but has continued to have programs that build capacity, provide grants for organizations, educational support, agricultural training, those types of things, financial literacy. And then the beneficiaries can also support community, healthy communities through participation in self-governance. And Act 302, which was adopted in 2001 by the state on the state level, promotes this idea of elected homestead organizations taking over the governance of their communities. So they can be through providing services, maybe managing select homestead assets, having a voice in lessee matters. But this has not been adopted by the US Congress yet. It's officially a part of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. But it is really important. We wanted to uplift it here because it really, Act 302 reaffirms kind of the importance of the beneficiaries' participation in carrying out the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. So it might be something that we want to include in this general plan, the language, until it gets adopted on a more official level through the US Congress as part of the Act. And the last couple slides before we get into our group discussion about healthy communities here, but this is just a simplified summary of some of the needs and desires that we heard in the first round of consultation related to healthy communities. So again, promoting self-determination and self-governance, on Hawaiian homelands. Also support for policies and programs that allow the beneficiaries to thrive and access Hawaiian homelands before receiving leases. Support for civic and cultural engagement on Hawaiian homelands. Finding more ways to steward and malama Hawaiian homelands, supporting self-sufficient communities, supporting economic development, finding space for sustainability and food security activities on Hawaiian homelands. Also, we heard a need to incorporate resilience to hazards and climate change, into this general plan update. It wasn't something that was really heavily included in the last general plan. And then something we heard a lot of is addressing safety and security and enforcement within homestead communities and on Hawaiian homelands. And then lastly, just to bring everything back to the vision that Jared shared at the end of his section, the idea is that all of these different policies and land uses in the general plan should support all, if not some, at least some of those vision elements that are shared. So for healthy communities, the two vision elements that are most closely aligned are, of course, strong communities. So activities that strengthen the lahui, build connections, promote health and well-being, and then also empower the beneficiaries, activities and opportunities for families and individuals to be self-sufficient, to thrive on Hawaiian homelands and here in Hawaii. So that's just the background information. And now we want to open it up and hear what you think. And I'm going to pass it back to Jared to facilitate this group discussion. Here, mahalo.
Okay, thanks, Malachi. All right, we're going to pause the presentation there. We have about 15 minutes set in this agenda to get your input on these basic two questions. What does a healthy community look like to you and your ohana? And what are your thoughts on what everyone can do to create healthy communities? So now is the time. If you wanted to raise your hand, give us a comment or your thoughts. Well, I don't see any hands going up. Keone, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I couldn't find the hand button. Aloha. O Keone ko ino ano anahola ahau. Yeah, so one thing that I think is important for a healthy Hawaiian community is the language, is the revitalization of our language and being able to hear Olelo Hawaii more in our ahapua and in Hawaiian home areas. So I would like to see it, in a document here that because it shows that the State Department does have some commitment to revitalizing Olelo Hawaii, especially in the sense of we're talking about what does a healthy Hawaiian and healthy indigenous communities look like. Having our language is critically important, for a healthy community. The other thing that I feel happens a lot, I mean, certainly in our ahapua here is, there's all this quoted language about compliance, and often there's fear generated around compliance and whether we are compliant, fear that our house or our land might be, that we have access to might be taken from us by the department. And I don't know how or why that happens, but it happens, and it really, I think, does affect the health of the community when we have to live in fear, because, there's all these rules. You mentioned that self-determination is part of the vision of where we want to head. Well, it's hardly self-determination when there's so many sort of compliance and threats being posed upon us in terms of what we can and can't do with our land. And just to give an idea for economic opportunity, I mean, there's a housing crisis, and also, there's not many places to stay for tourists. And I know this can be a very terrible idea, but I mean, Hawaiians need to make money. And if we can build a 200 square meter hale or a 500 square meter hale on our land and, host some tourists and make a bit of extra cash, well, why not? To help us move out of poverty until we find better ways than Airbnb. But a lot of people are doing it. I think, is it San Francisco have changed some of their laws that have enabled people to, do the Airbnb thing. And I know I know we're not allowed to do that, but it would be a really quick way for a family to bring in some extra income, especially when many of our people are working multiple jobs. And really, we're just keeping our heads afloat. We're not getting ahead. We're just keeping our heads above the water so we don't drown. And we need to be able to stand up out of the water and build our local economies and move our people out of poverty.
Yeah, great comments. Appreciate it. Okay, I see Cora, your hand is up. Go ahead, Cora.
Okay. Aloha. I'm trying to show my face, so so that it'd be respectful. Mahalo for your comment, the gentleman that spoke earlier. I just wanted to make a few comments, and that is, there's so much things that we went from all the different land designations to now going into the health of the community and what indicates a healthy community. Well, I would like to think that we first need to prioritize depending on each island. I mean, one size doesn't fit all. And so each island has to prioritize, because with what you're asking here as well, I mean, you're looking at what is a healthy, you look at the social part of it, social service, you're looking at the education, etc. All of that costs money. All of that entails money. And the reason why I said that we need to prioritize is because, oh shit, I don't know what happened. Oh, there we go. Because we need to support these programs by money. I like to hope that the existing, when we talk about healthy and well-being, we got Hawaiian Native programs, health programs already established. If we could build and support this Hawaiian health programs that are already in existence and start networking between DHHL and this other organizations such as Waianae Community Comprehensive, you got the Molokai Napu'uvai, all these different entities, that would really help if we don't create the will, but we support other Hawaiian programs. The other thing that my concerns is we dabbling into duplicating services with other Hawaiian organizations, such what OHA would normally, what OHA would do, what Kamehameha School would be doing. I mean, somehow when we talk about education, it's usually Kamehameha School, Bishop, and so I'm hoping that we could spend more time in having you folks somehow look at other Hawaiian entities that could also be in partnership instead of just DHS have this be all of DHSL thing with the Hawaiian beneficiaries. It has to bridge. You got to bridge with the others. So I just wanted to share that, in a rural area like Ualapu'e and Molokai, we would love to have an outreach of health services, of medical and social services. Anyway, that is just my mana'o. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, appreciate it. Some background on that. We're trying to establish the right land uses to go into the plan that trickles down into the island plans and to the regional plans. So part of the intent here is that we want to make sure we're going to cover all the bases that could come up when each community starts planning for their community. So there is a land use enough to allow enough flexibility or what a community is going to want. So very, very good. Any other comments out there? Oh, go ahead, Cora.
May I do a follow-up on what you just stated? No, I appreciate your comment. I do have one comment. That comment is, I know that in the past we have asked for the inventory of the tracts that DHH has. I think that's very important. And when we start talking about economic, we're also talking about mercantile. And so, let's be really clear when we say about island, when we talk about land designation, do we have the inventory behind what we're trying to designate these parcels to be, whether it's community, whether it's agriculture? we also need to know, what about mercantile? What is the existing inventory numbers here? Anyway, thank you. I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Like I said, we're in the last part of this round. We're going to be covering revenue generation, economic development. So we'll be keeping that in mind as we get ready for that one. So I appreciate that. I don't see any other hands up. So why don't we go into the goals, policies, and then we're going to, Paul Kema, go ahead.
Thank you, and aloha. I participated last night, but I just wanted to learn in terms of the direction you folks were going. And I wanted to try to give you some constructive criticism as we look at the big picture. And listening to many of our beneficiaries and those who are on the wait list, with regards to the healthy community, I'd like to interject that I think if we can hold an association to certain rules and guidelines to guide that association, like the DCCNR that we once had at Kalawahine, I think that would help us as an association not only gather together and share our mana'o, our issues, our concerns, our problems, but to be able to approach the department with constructive criticism on what our needs are here at Kalawahine. Now, I'm LSC, and we've been here like 21 years, but we've kind of been blessed, Jared, with Papa Kolea. With Papa Kolea and Kewalo, we've kind of been grandfathered into that family, and we're really blessed by what they've been able to accomplish for all three homesteads. And it proves to me that having a strong community voice like Papa Kolea and their community, because when they speak, we all listen because they've been through many of these issues that we as beneficiaries face. And when I go back to where I live here at Kalawahine, one of the major reasons why I bought into this homestead was that it would hold me and my 87 neighbors to the same guidelines. Having said that, not having that today, we as 88 homeowners, if we have issues, unless we can gather other lessees with the same issue and approach the department, it's just me and a battle, if you will. I don't want to say a battle, but my connecting with Hawaiian Homes. And so I just wanted to share that I see value in holding a community to the same guidelines so that together we can have some kind of consensus without having to go to one another and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So with regards to a healthy community, the fact that we here at Kalawahine do not have those guidelines, I as a lessee am kind of rowing my own boat unless I can find others with the same boat to jump in. And I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
That was great. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, let's keep moving on. We're going to be doing this all night, present something, slow down, stop, and have a discussion. So why don't we move forward, Malachi? Thanks.
Great. Mahalo for all those thoughtful comments. So the next part we're going to jump into is goals, policies, and metrics. So basically how healthy communities will be addressed, and all policies actually will be addressed in the general plan. So the first is through goals, which are pretty much broad statements that express where we want to be in the future when we get to the vision. And then we have policies, the next level down. And you can think of these kind of as the roads that lead to those more general goals. So those are actions or measurable steps that we need to take in order to achieve that goal. In the last plan, the 2002 plan, these are called objectives, but in this plan, we're kind of changing the language to policies. So you'll see those two grouped together. And then lastly, we have metrics, which are the ways to measure whether policies are succeeding. So we're going to run through we're going to review the existing goals, policies, from the last plan, and then we have some proposed new goals underneath. So up top, you see the purple. These are the goals in the purple table up top. These are the goals that were included in the last general plan. And those were empower homestead associations to manage and govern their communities and establish self-sufficient, healthy communities on trust lands. Those are nice, nice and broad. We do have some additional goals for consideration, and we'd love to get your feedback on for inclusion in this general plan. And the first one is to ensure both homestead and non-homestead land uses support healthy communities. Second is promote caring for existing homestead areas and planning for new communities. And then the last proposed additional goal is to support resilience and capacity building of beneficiaries and communities on trust lands. So I'm going to move into the policies here. And up top again are they're called objectives in the last general plan. So there are two. The first is to build partnerships with public and private agencies to ensure reliable and adequate delivery of services to homesteaders. The second is to establish and implement a planning system that increases participation in the development and use of Hawaiian homelands and improves communication between DHHL and the beneficiary community. I think that one kind of led to the consultation policy that I shared earlier, but also relates to what we heard from Uncle Paul just now. So the new policies that we're putting up for consideration for the general plan there's 5 of them. First is to set aside spaces for community uses and services in current and future homestead developments, and to gather input on desired community uses during the island and regional planning process. Second is partner with homestead communities, nonprofits, government agencies and other elite trusts to provide needed services to communities. Third is to promote self-governance of Hawaiian communities by beneficiary organizations that is consistent with Act 302 until such a time that Act 302 receives congressional approval to be incorporated in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And the last two are to incorporate resilient practices in development and programming of community use lands. And then this last one is actually one that was included in the last general plan, but it was in the natural resource management section. And we're proposing moving it here because I think it fits with how we're framing healthy communities in this plan update. And that's to enforce health and safety standards and protect life and property from the effects of natural hazards and climate change on Hawaiian homelands. And the last slide we're gonna share here are the metrics. So how do we measure if the policies are successful? And then Jared will share how you folks can share your feedback, your discussion, and also on Mentimeter again. But the metrics for healthy communities, these are kind of areas. We haven't set the specific numbers yet. We want to get your feedback on if these are the right things to be measured. And the first one is land dispositions issued, number of land dispositions issued for community use and community agricultural purposes, the number of acres that are designated for community use and community agricultural purposes, the number of partnerships created with other service providers, the number and type of community facilities and services, and the number of communities with disaster and climate change preparedness plans. And I see a question here, what does land dispositions mean? Land dispositions are basically leases. So leases are rights of entry or licenses that provide access and use of those lands that the department gives to community organizations or others on Hawaiian homelands. And the time frame is this plan is a 20-year plan. So we're looking forward over the next 20 years. So these might be but the metrics might be measured within like certain checkpoints within those 20 years. And if you have thoughts on that, we'd love to hear that. So those are the goals, policies, and metrics. And now we're just going to move back to Jared to facilitate a group discussion.
All right. Okay. How this is going to work is we have each of those goals, objectives, and metrics loaded up into our Mentee polling website where you can slide the level of your support or no support. So I'd encourage everybody again to get back into Mentee. We don't have to look at it now, Malakai. You can leave those discussion questions up. So open up for discussion again. If you guys want to say something, raise your hand. But we just want to get your feedback on the stuff we just presented on the goals and objectives, the policies, and the metrics. So Mia, looks like you had some questions about the period of time and the frequency of metrics. I think we'd be interested in to hear what your thoughts on those are.
Aloha, this is Mia. I'm in North Carolina, and
great.
I was curious. Metrics are always a nice, way to see how we're doing as far as what the plan is and how we're actually being successful or growing that. But for a plan that's looking out at 2040, hopefully we're going to be taking measurements like at least annually or every 6 months, a lot more frequent than 20 years down the line, seeing how we did for the last 20 years. Is that the plan?
Well, that's a great suggestion that we do it more frequently on an annual basis. So we'll put that down.
Cool.
Good. Paul Senior, you still had your hand up. Did you still have a comment? Oh, okay. Anybody else? Keone, go ahead.
Yeah, can we just go back a slide so we can see those metrics?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. I guess the problem I see here is, these are good. We definitely want to ensure that DHHL are awarding the use of land, and land's just not, growing guinea grass as we see often. But I don't think any of these will actually measure the health of our community. And so if these are all the metrics we have, we're seriously lacking on key metrics that'll tell us whether our communities are doing better. For example, just throwing some out there now. I don't know if we can come up with all this right now. What's the average family household income? That's a key metric. Things like health statistics. Do we still have diabetes? Are we at the top of all these sort of common diseases that should be preventable? Language. How many people in our community are speaking the language, and what levels of proficiency are they at? There's just so much lacking here. But I agree these are important because it ensures that the land is being used. But if we really want to measure the health of our communities, and perhaps it's not for DHHL to measure those. Perhaps it's the organizations that are empowered to actually deliver these, because obviously it's not DHHL's jurisdiction to teach us Olola Hawaii. And so perhaps it's the organizations that they support who will have to measure some of those key metrics that I just mentioned. But I do think that DHHL should be watching those and observing them to ensure that, the important things are happening.
That's an excellent suggestion, Keone. I think, I was thinking along the same lines too, is that when we do partner with other organizations to provide these types of services, usually our partnership is in the form of a license agreement with them. They utilize a portion of DHHL lands. And I think it would be great to be more consistent in requiring those organizations to collect those types of measures that you were talking about related to health and education. And I think it kind of touches upon what Cora said earlier, is that we shouldn't be duplicating services, right? We should be partnering with others that are more proficient in providing those types of services. And so when we do partner with those organizations, we should actively request that they start to measure those types of things that you said.
Yeah, very good. I'm also going to use this time before we get to Mia, just to plug our open house website. So we captured, Keone, what you just said. We're going to capture that in our minutes. But if anything else comes up, you guys think of something, go to the open house website, and that's how you can get us the additional thoughts that you might have that come up between now and then. Okay, Mia, go ahead. And then we'll go to Home Shidel.
Home.
Okay. Home Shidel. Okay.
Aloha, me again. So I was wanted to echo on what Keone was saying in regards to these metrics and whether or not they actually capture healthy community to determine whether or not we are successful around that. And the other thing has baseline been captured with the existing communities and how they feel about this, since they've already been operational and active Hawaiian homestead community?
I can kind of speak to that. That we're doing some research on monitoring evaluation right now. So we're going to be in looking at metrics. We're going to be considering whether there's baselines available as well. So and what things are available and can be measured.
Great. Okay. Hope that answers at least the question for now. Home and then Cora. Home, you're still muted. Are you okay unmuting yourself? I think your camera might be on too, but it's black. Well, we'll come back. Cora, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Home after that. Cora, go ahead.
This is so excellent discussion in looking at matrix to find out how successful this can be. I would have to agree with Andrew, just make comments that when we talk about other entities, they are federal recognized and they also have federal monies. And so there are already metrics that's already built into the organization on what type of service, whether it's medical. So I just wanted to put that out there. We might not need to create the metric system, but build on top of what the existing might be. Anyway, I really appreciate all the comments. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cora. Home, it looks like you're not muted anymore. Go ahead.
Aloha. I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me, Jared?
Yes.
Okay. So I just kind of wanted to speak to the previous, if you could bring up the previous slide. So when you say number of dispositions or acres or et cetera, are you talking about what you're considering as actual numbers of dispositions for community use, acres, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay. And
without actually establishing what is the threshold, but we're just trying to, what should we be looking at to measure success in this regard? That's the main topic here. Go ahead, sorry.
So I think Cora brought up a really important point, right? About each homestead, each island is very different. We're not all the same. So for us in Kapolei, we have very limited acreage in terms of community use, agricultural purposes. So I think that's a consideration that as you go through this process, you need to consider, because there are certain areas that would have access to more lands than others. And so it may not fit into the metrics that you might conceive. And that is where I believe you need to reach out to the homestead associations within those areas, because they better know their homestead areas or their ahapua'a or their regional, if they've been working on their regional plans. And through this process, so as you come down this first tier of the general plan and then get into the island plan, and then you get into your your regional plans, for example, Kapolei, then that is where you need to go from the bottom up and look at what the various homesteads who have come together in their regional plans to define what they envision their projects will be for the next 10 years. And from there, look at what you need to provide, or the department should be looking at providing, so that these projects can come to fruition during this process. So I understand the 3-tier process, but once you're done with this, you also need to look at the island plan and also the regional plans to really establish a better line for these metrics. Mahalo.
That is an excellent perspective. Thinking about Kapolei. Thank you. That's really great. That's going to help us a lot. Anybody else? No, why don't we check out the Mentee, Malachi? Let's see what kind of responses we got on the Mentee now. There's 33 of us. Looks like we got 12 responses so far on the Mentee. This is the existing goals from the 2002 plan, mid 4. So that's pretty strong agreement that those two are still relevant. Similar to last night's numbers that we saw. Up to the next one. Oh, 11 guys answered this one. Okay, so 2 4s on the bottom, but to ensure both homestead and non-homestead land uses support healthy communities. This one, less support, kind of almost in the middle. For any of the guys that might have ranked that one low, would you be willing to let us know what was the thinking, or what is the concern there? Somebody? Is somebody ready to speak? No? Aminta Aina? Oh, no. Okay, how about the next one? So the 2 objectives, okay, pretty good agreement there, or in the 4s. Had about 12 guys. Looks like we got about 12 guys on the Mentee. How about the next one? Let's check out the metrics, since we were on the metrics for so much. Oh, sorry. Policy was strong agreement there. Looks like these also seem pretty good. I mean, these are good metrics, but what we heard tonight was we maybe got to think about specific communities and what they might have already. And we were missing some stuff like we heard from Keone. So, okay, well, pretty good. Oh, only 8 guys answered this one. So if you guys can, get onto your web browser and get onto Mentee. We have the link in the chat. We're going to do this exercise again with the Mentee in the next section. So hopefully we can get more guys on there. Home, you had another comment? I see your hand up. You can go ahead. No? Oh. Okay. Anything from the chat we need to cover? We're making great time. So, we have lots of time to talk here. Support what anti-home has. Skipped a question. Wording wasn't good. Oh, okay. Sorry, Keone. Are you guys ready to move on to the natural and cultural resources? Last call. Any more thoughts on healthy communities out there? Seeing none, why don't we move on? Yeah, let's go. So at this point, we're gonna move into the next section, and I'm gonna turn it over to Melissa.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Aloha, everybody. Nice to see you again. Let's see if I can get this screen up here. Okay, so this section of the meeting focuses on natural and cultural resources on Hawaiian homelands. And let's get right into it. So here's a visual of some of the many landscapes and features in the natural areas that encompass Hawaiian homelands. So everything from Makai coastal areas to mountain pulleys and volcanoes and fish ponds, and just a huge range of incredible resources. Got streams and forests. So there's a lot of abundance in these areas. Next slide, please. And while DHHL has pretty limited resources to take care of such large areas, as we'll get into, there are some plans, especially for some of these areas that need special management. And here's a few examples of those. So South Point is one example. The Malama Cultural Park it looks like that one is actually under development right now. And these plans just kind of help the department lay out a path to take care of some of these areas, especially the ones that have watersheds or species that need taken care of, or cultural features. Next slide. So this is a little snapshot of the areas on Hawaiian homelands that are basically natural areas, and a lot of them, because of their natural features and sensitivity or other characteristics, aren't necessarily suitable for homestead uses. They can't necessarily be developed. So you can see here, there's conservation, special district, and general agriculture. So conservation and special district areas are more sensitive or have unique conditions that would make them harder to develop. And that's a little over 30% of Hawaiian homelands. And general agriculture are areas that may be suitable for eventual homesteading, but aren't designated for homesteading immediately. So there may be interim uses. So collectively, these areas are over 60% of the DHHL's land holdings. And that's a lot of land. You can see where they exist on the maps here. So everything that's in those colors are these natural areas that are basically open space. Next slide. And so the challenges with these lands are that, there's a substantial percentage that are in these designations, but it's not the department's core mission to manage natural resources. And in fact, there aren't any dedicated staff to do that right now. And so, it's really important that the department has partnerships and works with beneficiary organizations and others that have the Kuleana to take care of these areas, and and the expertise to do that. So that's really what they've been trying to do in a lot of these areas, is partner with the right organizations and with beneficiaries to try to take care of them. And some of the challenges that they've been facing and addressing are ungulate and invasive species management. There's been areas that have problems with trespassing, vandalism, illegal dumping, and other activities. Enforcement is an issue as well, with the lack of dedicated staff. And there's not always clear rules about how beneficiaries can access these areas and what's allowed when they do access them. And then it's hard to enforce when there's unauthorized uses. So I think, the bottom line is really what's needed is a way to facilitate more partnerships, and also more resources devoted to natural resource management within the department as well. There's also opportunities in these lands, though some of these lands could be used for revenue generation. They can be used for stewardship and education and Malama Aina activities, either in long term or in the short term until they're used for something else. All right, let's go to the next slide. So tying this back to the land use designations that we've been talking about, there's 3 that are mainly associated with natural and cultural resources. Stewardship is a new designation that we're proposing, but it basically would be a replacement for the general agriculture designation. So these areas, like I said before, maybe eventually, some of them may be suitable for homesteads eventually, but in the meantime, they can be used to benefit beneficiaries and the trust in other ways. And special district are areas that have unusual opportunities or constraints. So that might be areas with archaeology, or areas that are in flood hazard areas, or stream zones, greenways and cultural resources. There's kind of different categories of these, or maybe coastal areas as well would fall in this category. And then there's conservation areas. So these are lands that have sensitive resources that need to be protected and generally wouldn't be developed. And, there's limited uses allowed in these areas. Next slide. Here's a few examples of natural and cultural resource management that's currently occurring on Hawaiian homelands. So there are cleanup and restoration efforts in some areas that are community driven or nonprofit driven. There's commercial forestry taking place. There's agricultural and pastoral leases, and INA-based education, ecosystem and watershed management, and invasive species removal and fire mitigation. So these are all taking place mostly through partners, either nonprofits or beneficiary organizations. And some of them, I think, are also being facilitated by department staff that are in charge of the management plans for certain areas. Okay. And how does this relate to the vision? The vision has the 4 elements, and the 2 that are most related are the sustainable trust and healthy land and water, because these areas can be used to help sustain the trust in beneficiaries through revenue generation. So they may be able to be used for energy generation and just maintaining land for future homesteads. And then, of course, protecting these areas helps ensure healthy land and water into the future and access for cultural, spiritual, and subsistence practices. Okay, next slide. So we have a few questions here that we want you to think about in our discussion, and I'll turn it back over to Jared.
All right, you guys know the drill. Anybody have any thoughts on natural and cultural resource management? These questions are kind of more prompts to help guide the discussion, but anybody out there? Joni, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, I think, you know, in talking about metrics and healthy communities and now natural resource management, you know, one good thing to monitor is the quality of the water in our awa, in our rivers. And you know, obviously that's something we should be looking after. A healthy river, you know, from the top of the ahapua down to the ocean is a really good indicator that we're looking after, yeah, that ecosystem. So yeah, that's what I want to throw in there, that I think, well, someone should be monitoring it. Yeah, maybe we need an organization to do that for us. Obviously, DHHL probably doesn't have the capacity to do that.
Yep. Very good. Oh, Cora, I see your hand. Go ahead, Cora.
Aloha. I think these questions are awesome questions. I did want to say that when we look at the cultural resource management piece, I would say that the technical services has been very helpful in a sense that it, you know, in this particular case in Walapui, I can only talk about that, it's under environmental assessment. And with the professionals that are looking into all these different impacts has really been very helpful for the beneficiaries that would be settling there and for the neighborhood in that area, you know. So one thing that I was thinking about is that when we look at our natural resources, we also need technical services that needs to be provided to our beneficiaries. That got to continue. Then the other thing that that I thought was helpful is that not every place got water, you know, but there's always underground stream and being able to get that type of study for our beneficiaries are very important, you know, as to how much is out there, how much actually fitting the underground stream, you know, and getting those technical studies would very be helpful. You know, in order to know what to do, you need to know what's the baseline, what is the existing resources now, and its functioning level at, you know, and so I think those technical services will, if they can continue to help our people, then it will better help us manage our resources. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Very good. Mia, you had your hand up, and then Home again. Mia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow on, segue from what Cora was just saying in regards to existing resources that are out there or existing homelands and Hawaiian lands that are currently being managed or currently in use. and whether or not there's any information on how that's all going, whether or not it's successful, what's being done, what are the lessons learned from those.
You're asking what were the lessons learned from the current activities occurring for cultural resource management, right?
Well, we talked with the land management division, and that slide that talks about the issues and opportunities kind of sums up a lot of those key ones. I think they're just really limited in what they can do with no dedicated staff, and so they've been fortunate to find partners that will work with them and that have overlapping missions. But right now, it can be hard to get those partnerships in place. And as a lot of beneficiaries know that have tried to do that, have tried to work with the department to get leases or partnerships for Malama Aina and management, there can be a lot of red tape in that too. So I think the department is aware that they need a process to facilitate partnerships like that. And that's one of the things that I think the general plan could encourage. So I think that's a big need. And if they could get funding for additional staff, that would be great too.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Home, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Okay, so can you go to the next slide, I think? Jared, please. Or the one before we started this.
Let's see. That was the
next one.
On the vision or discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about what kinds of natural resource management activities we'd like to see, there is a limit on resources at the department. We know that. We understand that. As to what expectation or rules should be in place, again, each area is different, right? So on the Big Island, there was, issues there and rounding up cattle and taking them to slaughter and distributing the meat. That requires a specific type of skill or permitting or process, right? You have to have a processing plant to do that. So I believe that for the most part, there are existing policies that the department has. What I think is lacking is that information to our beneficiaries, to the organizations that may have an interest in supporting resource management, whether it be rounding up cattle, whether it be reforestation. There isn't quite a program. And so really what the department needs to define for its beneficiaries, because what I may want to do, another group may not agree with me. And so what you have is two different groups coming before the commission and saying, no, you should be doing it this way, or you should be giving us this. So the department has to take a good, strong look of their policies and vet that through the different organizations, especially the homestead associations that are closest to these areas, because again, they know the place, they know the Aina, they know what should or shouldn't happen there. Many of our people who live near these places, these areas, like Kahiki Nui, God bless those people who live up there, because that is not one place that I could personally live. But these people live up there, and they know the area, they know what to do, they know how to do things. A lot of times when I'm at, or prior to COVID, sitting in the commission meetings, this is the stories that I continually heard. And so I think for the most part, the department really needs to reach out and sit down with these different groups to develop a plan for the right natural, for the right resource management of our lands that are not currently available to put homes on, because we need people. I mean, the fact that the department had to go in and pull out 300 cars at Maku'u, that's a lot. That's a lot of dollars that went into that. Why couldn't that be stopped? We don't know, but that's a lot of cars to be pulling out. So every island, again, every homestead area need to be part of the conversation for these particular type of resource management. Mahalo.
Yep, very good. I think that is the goal. Cora, your hand is up again. Go ahead.
I did. I'm so sorry. Yes, I forgot to mention, if you could go back to your counterpartners slide, it was something to do with stewardship. It was relabeling land use designate right there. Yep. The stewardship, I kind of frowned it on that because if I understood what that was, it was a temporary allowed association or license or whatever to have the stewardship temporarily until the land is ready for development. I think that's what I heard say. To me, that's one way of delaying putting our people on the land, regardless if it's ready or not. I feel that would just prolong not putting our people on the land. So I don't agree with the stewardship being labeled it to be available to in the interim. I don't agree with that. If it's land that can, then why not? Then you should designate it what it should be, but I don't think to roadblock it temporarily and when internally we're going to use it for this. No, that's been the problem. That's why our people not on their land. And so I don't know. That's my mana'o. I wanted to share that I don't agree with intern use as stewardship. I think it needs to be identified and move on it. We've been waiting too long. Anyway, that's my comment. And I totally agree on what the speaker said earlier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cora. Mia, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Aloha, Jared. I'm new to these meetings, but I'm not new to DHHL and I'm not new to OHA. Been a Hawaiian my whole life. And I'm confused at the slides that I've been looking at. If his planning has been going on for almost a year now. And I see, slides, charts, numbers, and all of that. But where are the facts? Like, how many Hawaiians are on Hawaiian homelands on all the islands? How many Hawaiians are engaged in the resource management? If you want to have metrics, we got to have a starting point, right? And it would be nice, and I think to some of the comments made by Cora and Home, it would be nice to know how engaged are people? How can these 33 people on this meeting rally, right? Get other people engaged and understand and explain what's going on, because without those kind of facts easily accessible, it's difficult to see where we are today versus where you want to be in, or where we all want to be in 2040.
Cool metric. Number of beneficiaries and lessees engaged in the planning process. I like that one.
Yeah,
I mean,
or
that's what I was hearing, but
yeah,
I hear
engaged
you.
in the
Yeah, that's
process,
great.
or to all of your questions. You know, you talked about number of dispositions. How many are dispositioned today? How many parcels are available for disposition that are not dispositioned today? You have, how can beneficiaries participate in natural resource management? How do beneficiaries, there's quite a few beneficiaries out there participating. You know, they participate in cleaning up he'eaus. They participate in cleaning up the fish ponds. They participate in educating the communities, engaging the tourism on Hawaiian culture. There's a lot of things that are going on today, but if that can be presented on what's happening today and where we want to be in 2040, I think you'll get a lot more encouragement from the communities as far as, hey, we are doing something. Because right now it feels, and this is the first time I'm attending this meeting, so I might be, you know, just behind everybody else who's on here. But it would be nice to see where we are today versus where we were 20 years ago versus where we want to be in another 20 years.
Right. Yeah, good point. Good point.
We can put a link in the chat, but there's actually on the open house there, in the beginning of this process, we kind of did a look at what has happened since the 2002 general plan, a little bit of an evaluation. So it may not address everything you're interested in, but it addresses a lot of the things that the 2002 general plan talked about. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other discussion? Keone, go ahead.
Still haven't found the raise my hand button. I totally agree with Mia there. I mean, you're talking about metrics, and it would show that you did your homework as well if you can tell us what's the status today, and that would help us guide us moving forward. I want to point out something though. You know, you mentioned DHHL doesn't have much resources. I mean, a lot of Hawaiians also don't have many resources. How many of us have a disposable income or free time? And so it's, you know, it's, and in your the wording you use a lot of times, it's really hyper focused on beneficiaries and trust land, and I worry that there isn't enough people with free time and disposable income, for example, who can, you know, work for a nonprofit for free, you know, to meet some of these goals that we're talking about. I mean, why can't Hawaiians get paid, you know, to do a lot of this work that pretty much you're asking for us to get together as a community and do for free? I work for a nonprofit, and we come from that mentality of, you know, doing things on the smell of an oily rag, and we work to get funding so we can pay our staff a living wage. But I think, you know, that's, you got to understand, like, this is where we're coming from. So asking a community that's already been marginalized for centuries to come together and do all this work for free is a really big ask. But there are Hawaiians out there who do have a lot of free time and disposable income, but they might not necessarily be beneficiaries. And so I want to make sure that we can be inclusive of all Hawaiians to help in being stewards of land in Hawaii, and not just trust land, any land. You know, I know, for example, there is a group of Hawaiians who would love to have some land to look after, but don't have access to land and aren't part of the DHHL, meaning, you know, they don't get the memos to attend hui like this because they're not quote unquote beneficiaries. But they could certainly, you know, work with beneficiaries and with communities in DHHL. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, appreciate that. Good points too. Yeah. Anybody else? Are we ready to move into the discussion on the goals, objectives, policies, and metrics? Yep, looks like it. Why don't we move on to the next section, Melissa? Thanks.
Okay, and again, there is a Mentee section on this, so you can put your input in that. And just a quick reminder that goals are broad statements that articulate the desired end state. Policies are how you get to the goals, and metrics are ways to measure if you're getting to the goals and your progress toward them. So in the 2002 general plan, there was one key goal related to natural and cultural resources, and it's pretty broad. Be responsible long-term stewards of the trust lands and the natural, historic, and community resources located on these lands. And at this point, we're not proposing any additional ones because it's a pretty comprehensive goal. So let us know if you think otherwise. But otherwise, we'll move on to the objectives and policies. So 2002 had several objectives related to natural and cultural resources, and we're proposing to add a handful as well. So these are, they included in the 2002 plan to preserve and protect significant natural, historic, and community resources on trust lands, to manage interim land dispositions in a manner that's environmentally sound and doesn't jeopardize their future uses, to allow Native Hawaiian use of natural resources on trust lands for traditional and cultural purposes. And then the last one is the one that Malachi mentioned, we moved up to healthy communities. And then in addition, we're considering policies to protect water resources on Hawaiian homelands, obtain resources for dedicated staff within DHHL for natural and cultural resource management, because currently they don't have that. Incorporate and provide for beneficiary access to natural resources in special area management plans. Pursue partnerships that provide access to Hawaiian homelands for cultural and Aina-based practices. Pursue partnerships that support resource protection and conservation on Hawaiian homelands, and improve enforcement. So yeah, let us know what your thoughts are on each of those in the Mentee and in the discussion, and if you have suggestions for changes or additional ones. Let's go to the metrics slide, and then we'll go back to the discussion. So metrics, we already heard, I think Keone suggested that we look at water quality. So that is one of the ones that we're looking at, and hopefully there's readily available data for that the department can use. Water flow is another one to think about. And the number of cleanup and stewardship projects with access to Hawaiian homelands, the number of beneficiaries participating in cultural practices, and number of natural and cultural resource projects. And I just want to say before we get into the discussion that one of the things, we've talked a lot about metrics in this meeting, and I really appreciate that. I think we're getting some really good input. And just to share some of the things we're thinking about when we think about metrics, we're thinking about what kind of information can the department collect, when it does it regularly does surveys of beneficiaries. So we're thinking about things that we can collect through survey data. We're also thinking about what data is readily available that the department might be able to access, like through Department of Health or DLNR. And then, we're thinking about what can the department actually measure? Like, what do they already measure, and what can they measure without, adding a whole, additional load on their on their plate. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about, and appreciate your input. Let's go to the discussion.
All right, this is the last exercise in Mentee, so same deal, the slider to indicate your level of support or disagreement with each of these. I'm going to open the floor up for discussion. Cora, go ahead.
My one comment I wanted to make was the hunting. I guess it falls under, can you go back to the slide Melissa was looking, had to do with, yeah, this is the one, policy. Part of our culture, natural culture resource management, we do have like deer, we have ungulates, but for Molokai, I don't know, other islands might be pigs, I don't know, or cows, but it gotta allow our beneficiary the right to hunt, and we need to put in safety, some sort of rules or policy consideration to allow this type of activity for our beneficiaries. So I like to include that somehow, hunting, to include that. I cannot speak for the other islands, but anyway, I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're right. It does come up on every island, you know, Maui, Big Island. Even Kauai, you can hunt on Kauai too. Okay, anybody else? Maybe some of the guys we haven't heard from tonight. Okay, Ron and Doreen, go ahead.
Hi, Jared. This
Hi.
is Doreen Padani. I'm looking at Keone Mahelona. Hi. You had talked about 501c and how we're gonna make things happen, you know? And I was just talking to my husband. You know, we got a lot of beautiful sites on Department of Hawaiian Homelands. South Point, Mauna Kea. I'm on the Big Island. I'm just pointing out some places. And, you know, we have a lot of people that are illegally going on there. How about putting some gates over there and charging them? Or even better, those who are going on these properties, all these Department of Hawaiian Homelands properties, and they are doing it legally. How about we charge them too? And with this money, we can go and do all the or some of the things that are being mentioned in this meeting. How about that? Ryan, your turn.
Yeah, what brought up this discussion is, I don't know if any of you been to Akaka Falls. It's one of the go-to places on this island. It was very sacred places for the ancient Hawaiians. That's where only the kahunas were allowed to go. Anyway, recently, one of our neighbors, the beneficiary, moved here from Honolulu. And the state of Hawaii contracted Diamond Parking to charge people to go to walk Akaka Falls, which was free for as long as I lived on this island. But now they start charging people by the cars. If you're local, then I think it's free. So my thinking is, if any of you been to Kalai, it really, really, really bothers me. This is Hawaiian Homelands. And if you notice that the picture on conservation, the middle picture is Kalai, South Point. And if you look close on the pictures, you'll notice none of them are local or native. They're all tourists. So why are we allowing people to basically denigrate the property there? Bishop Museum, Andrew, if I'm not mistaken, did a survey of that area, and they found
Oh no, we lost Ron. I think you froze.
Yeah, Ron, you froze, bro. But yeah, I second that, Ron. That's the same thing that happened at Maui, Yell Valley. You have to pay to go and look at your beautiful island. I second that to you. I local, I grew up there, I was born there. I can't even go up there to enjoy. You gotta pay.
And it's no different than Mauna Kea. You know, it went to the courts. That land is Hawaiian homeland. So I always felt the Native Hawaiian should be able to put a toll booth up there and collect X amount per head, just like they do at the national parks, just like they do at Napopo. You know, this is the Hawaiian treasure. Waipio Valley is another place. But I'm sure every island have their wahipanas that should be collected, protected. The biggest problem that I see is DHHL has no enforcement powers at all. Mauna Kea, I remember, Andrew, when Joby was here, we had a meeting with the DLNR, the police department, the feds that manages the mountains, and they all said, if DHHL asked us for help, we would help. Mauna Kea is where everybody goes to hunt. And everybody will warn you, is very, very dangerous. There have been a lot of incidents on Mana Road, yeah, Andrew. And so enforcement to me on the Big Island is one of the biggest issues, not only on non-homestead land, available lands, but also in the homesteads. A lot of the communities here, I'm sure some of you, the older communities, drugs has become a major, major problem. And, you know, as much as they try, the associations, they're really at a loss. You know, they have neighborhood watch like that, but I don't think a lot of communities ever get a handle once drugs get in the community. But anyway, that we need funding. I like Representative Sykes, if you read the news today, that he's going to try to get, what, 600 million, Andrew? Are we be able to handle that kind of money? And I feel if we do, that I think every island should help to be at the table to decide what kind of homes that they would like to see. There's so much opportunities now. If you look at Google, you know, in Africa, they're building homes out of mud using 3D printing. It's just so amazing. And they can put up a home in 2 days. But that's another thing I feel that we're not doing. We're not looking, we should be doing away with state homes, to be honest. Technology covered homes.
Ron, we lost that last point you were trying to make. Were we not looking at something? You were kind of breaking up. Try to say that again.
Yeah, if it's possible, every island, like Oahu, they need vertical homes, right? But on the Big Island, we have a lot of land. Then horizontal homes is okay. But I just feel that there's so much change in the building technology on homes, is what I'm saying. That we should bring, every island should bring association and people in the trades. If you had to build your home, what would you do now? What would you use? How would we try to improve the quality but reduce the cost? And I know there's ways of doing it. I myself just right now, I was going to tell Andrew, I'm going to send him. Me and my wife is building a 8 by 12 shed. We'll put it up in 2 weeks. Just her and I. I'm 77. My wife's 68. And her and I, nobody else is building a 9-foot tall, but 8-foot wide shed. And it won't fall down, I promise you. But the idea is look at ways to bring down the cost of the homes. And the only way, and that's why I was joking with Andrew, in Orlando in April, they have a trade show called Manufactured Homes. These manufactured homes, the only difference between a site home and a manufactured home is the manufactured home is built under a roof. So you don't have to worry about rain. You don't have to worry about snow. You can build it, 7 days a week if you want. In the Big Island, the Kanolihua industrial area, a lot of the leases is coming due, 22, 23, and 24. Well, when they leave, they have to leave the structure. And I'm hoping, I was telling Andrew, take your wife and kids and go to Orlando. And you go to the trade show and send your kids to your wife and son to Disney World. They'd appreciate it. But to talk to these people, and they say, if you do that, you can shave 30 to 40% of the cost of a home. My idea is, why can't DHHL or an association do the business and what you call it, build these up manufactured homes? And it's not, it's not big homes. And what really amazed me is, remember Trump's HUD secretary? He was a brain surgeon.
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson. And he's on the one praising these trade homes. And I understand why he didn't want to become the Secretary of Health, because because he's Black. I think he says in the Black community, they cannot afford a lot of the homes that's available. And by doing manufactured homes, he feels that the cost is done. These homes already, before they go to the job site, all the electrical, all the plumbing is already in place. So basically—
How much are they, Ron? How much are they? How much are the homes?
I don't know. That's why I wanted Andrew to take wait listers, about a dozen, him and Julie take about a dozen wait listers and ask them, would you be willing into living in a home like this? Also a mobile home in Pune. You know, we just went through lava flow. So a lot of the insurance companies will not insure homes anymore because it's a zone 1 or something, you know. So I always felt, well, why don't we do a test market development and use trailer homes? And I was talking to a banker, and he didn't like the idea at first. Then he thought about it, and he said, well, you know, it's on wheels, right? I said, yeah. He said, oh, that means we can tow it if they don't pay. I said, yeah, you can't repossess a trailer home. But joking aside, if that's all you can afford, you know, and you're willing to live in a trailer home, why not? Or a modular home. But to look outside the box for other ways of, you know, living in a land, but got to be affordable to most Hawaiians. I'm sorry, most Hawaiians that I know cannot afford a home anymore. Not anymore. And by the way, I've met 4 people now, one from Nanakule, one from Waianae, one from Kauai, and I think one from California. They sold their homes so they could come to the Big Island and live. And they lived in, I lived in this area called Ainaloa. And it's sort of the Wild West. But, you know, these people from Nanakule, they love it, even though they paid $300,000 for a home, which I thought is really crazy in Ainaloa. But to them, it was cheap because they came from Kauai. So their families, they're trying to get their families, if you own your home, sell it, come here, and you're going to get leftover money. And they love it because they're retiring over here. So.
Okay. Yeah, Ron, I think that's a good point. You know, looking at the manufactured homes, I know that's for the industry, that's really important for looking at bringing down home costs in Hawaii in particular. So good point, getting that in there. Very good. Malachi, why don't we start looking at the Mentee results and then, you know, still encouraging anybody else, or Ron, if you still have more stuff, but if there's anyone else. Holly, go ahead.
Okay, Ron was talking about getting people, yeah. Where I live, they have self-help homes that came up. So they get like 10 families, build each other's house, and then they move on, self-help home. That might be something, you know, they can take a look at. I mean, it doesn't cost like $500,000 for a self-help home, I think, but now it's costing that much when they sell it, I guess. But that's a good idea, Ron. Yeah,
I would agree too, Holly. Different models for building homes, because homes are too expensive. Actually, you know, the price is only going up. So, okay, looks like we got the same 12 guys that participating on the Mentee. For this existing goal, remember, we weren't proposing any new goals. This was pretty comprehensive. So looks like it strongly agree. How about the next one? Okay, for the 2002 objectives, carrying those forward, general agreement, still in the 4s. Seems to be okay. Mia, go ahead.
Help me understand this survey question, because you're talking about when you're talking about the 2002, the 2002 agreement.
2002 was the last general plan, yeah.
Right. And were these saying, do you agree with the objective or metric, or how good they did? Because I don't think we met any of these.
Well, the question is kind of like, do you agree that it should be carried forward into the current update or not? I think that's the gist of it.
Let's see the results since 2002. I don't think we met any of these objectives. So we're going to carry them forward into 2040.
Or you can suggest what you would replace them with. I mean, they're here to hear that too. If there's some we got to change.
And we do that just in our conversation, or I guess back to your site, open house site?
Both. So if we talk about it today, it's going to get documented in our meeting minutes. We'll post all the minutes onto the website and we'll carry this forward. Or you can post, you can put your comments in through the website, or you can email us. There's quite a number of ways you can get your information to us.
So I saw several comments on the wording that was used in the previous survey set of questions. I just wanted to reiterate that I agree with the people's comments. I didn't think the wording was very good. It was rather negative or controlling. But in regards to this particular set, my comment is it's difficult to have something move forward when it's not considered successful.
Which ones would you be referring to? Would you share that?
The 2002, so go back to the previous set of questions. So have they been responsible long-term stewards of trust lands? In my opinion, not since 2002. No, that hasn't gotten any better. Go back to the next one, previous. Previous. You went forward. The first question on there.
Wouldn't you want them to reverse course and over the next 20 years, try to meet that goal?
So what's changing? What's going to be different? I know that's what we're talking about, is making that change, but it's difficult to have a positive response to something that I feel was not successful for the last 20 years.
And also, who are we talking about? Like, who needs to be responsible stewards?
Department of Hawaiian Homelands, I believe. That was their plan. That was the plan.
Yeah.
That's a good point, though. And, the last plan was very short. It was only about 5 pages long. And this one's going to be, and it also didn't have any metrics or a plan for being monitored. And that's kind of true of plans that were prepared in that time frame in general. Plans today are getting a lot more oriented toward implementation. And so that's kind of one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that there's more accountability toward the goals and the policies, and that there's a way to know if you're making progress toward them. So that's some of the things we're trying to achieve with the plan update. And so, yeah, that's something we always hear with planning processes. We didn't get there, so why plan forward? But you still need to have a sense of where you want to be in 20 years in order to make the steps to work toward it. So, and then you can always improve your accountability along the way.
Great. I think you make a good point, Melissa. On the way that's phrased, though, it says share your level of agreement for each 2002 natural and cultural resources goal. Right. Well, the 2002 goal wasn't achieved. I don't know if everybody who said that they agree with this understood what was really what the intention is of it. But regardless of that, in the new plan, it would be nice to reflect on the previous plan, what failed, what was successful, why, so that there is growth or lessons learned going into the new plan.
Excellent. Yeah. And we'll adjust. We have one more meeting right in this, so we'll make sure that that's clear, the questions on the Mentee. So we appreciate that type of feedback for sure. Home and then Cora, go ahead.
Sorry, Jared, and to everyone else, I'm having trouble with my computer. But, you know, I'm glad that Mia brought this up, because when we first started in our first discussion, and I looked at what the 2020 goals or, you know, plan was, if we really look at it carefully and we look at what we're doing today, much of it hasn't changed. And so I tend to agree with what Mia is saying. But that doesn't mean that we haven't made progress in other areas. So I had just moved into my home in May of 2002, even though I closed my signed for it in October of 2001. But in the back of my mind, I don't recall the department being able to have these kinds of meetings. You know, basically it was in-person type meetings. So we don't know what the discussion was with those who attended those meetings. But I would venture to say that probably not too different from what we're saying now in 2021 and 2022. But I do think that we have made some strides in various areas, especially for homestead associations. And when we talk about their natural resources, I think we need to look at the spectrum of Hawaiian homelands. For me, very often in our homestead, I happen to live in a DCCNR homestead. And yes, at first it was very difficult for people to adjust, but after 20 years, we find that most people actually appreciate it. Now, that's not for everyone. And that's what we were told when we were going to the orientation meetings, that if you don't want to abide by rules, then maybe this isn't the place for you. With that being said, there's a lot that the department does in my homestead that should actually be taken care of by the city and county of Honolulu. For example, our streetlights. Every quarter, I go around and I check our streetlights and I put in a list to the department for them to fix it. Residents have the opportunity to also call the department and you know, let them know that a light in front of their home isn't functioning. The other thing that the department does is they trim our trees in our homestead along our main streets, not the ones in front of our homes, that is our Kuleana, but the main streets, those trees, and there's 33 of them. There is repair of sidewalks that the department has to manage. So one of the bills that are coming out in the legislature is that going forward, that a year, I believe, within a year after a project is completed, that for Oahu, that the city and county of Honolulu take over the infrastructure, which would lessen the amount of funds that the department would have to expend to take care of our infrastructure. These are the kinds of things that I think that at different homesteads and in different areas we need to look at. So are they being, because I consider my homestead not so much, you know, the natural or historic, but it's a community resource that's part of the DHHL Land Trust. So the department doesn't just handle just purpose in terms, of course, their mission is to make sure that our people who are on the wait list get homes, but there's many other things. There's a huge spectrum that the department is responsible for. So when I look at this and I saw another comment being made about whether or not is it DHHL's responsibility or is it beneficiary responsibility? And I would say that it is all of our Kuleana, the department, and as beneficiaries, we have to hold the department responsible, but we also have to share that responsibility, that Kuleana. So I believe it's all of us. And as Hawaiians, we should know that. And, you know, I live in an urban community When I go to Waiahuli, where my cousin lives, it's so beautiful. It's so, there's such a stark difference from my homestead. Although I love my homestead, I love my neighbors. But when you go to a different island, or you go to a different homestead and you see the natural beauty, right? Because I don't see that. I see houses. I don't see this beautiful view from up on Haleakala, or when I go to Laiopua, to see the ocean up there on the hill. So each of us have Kuleana, and we need to take that Kuleana, even if it means that when you're walking on your street or walking in your neighborhood, that when you see opala on the street, you pick it up. Today's teenagers, I don't know, they don't know that lesson. They know how to throw it down. They don't know how to pick it up. And so we have Kuleana within our own homesteads to make sure that we teach our children how to take care of malama, our land, to malama our resources, including the vai, including the kai. So I would say that we all share in this Kuleana, because I'm getting old now. So, I mean, I am old, not getting, I'm there. But I'm hoping that these younger voices, Keone, Mia, I'm so happy that you are here with us and have joined us, because you hear the voices of all that is spoken this evening. And this may be your first meeting, or it may be your second meeting, but I hope it won't be your last. And I encourage all of our young people to go to your kupunas in your homestead or in your community and talk to them and reach out to them and ask them, how can I help kokua? How can I help malama? And that's where I think we need to look at in terms of our natural resources. Our people are our greatest natural resources. Mahalo.
We're not hearing you, Jared. I'll take over for the moment until you.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, Cora. Did you have a comment? Go ahead.
I wasn't sure, should I speak or no? Anyway, I just wanted to add that when we look at 2002 and currently, I have to say that there has been changes. I mean, with the resource, I have to say that there has been progress with DHHL and the association. And I got to just put it out there that there are projects that's been ongoing, and there are movement. And so although I have to agree that there are movement and it has been positive, I couldn't speak for every location, but the areas that are project related, I gotta give credit where credit's due. And it's a partnership between DHHL and the association. And I just wanted to put that out there, that there are some movement, positive movement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cora. Well, we're right at 8 o'clock. Any last burning words? Otherwise, I'm gonna walk through the wrap up. Why don't we go to the next slide, Malachi? These are just, you've seen this slide already. Quick plug, next set of meetings are gonna be February 16 and 17, and we want everybody to come back. You'll be notified in the same ways. Okay, next slide. Just a reminder, visit the open house and the website. Cover that quite a bit, and then leave it on the next slide and we'll finish there. So these are contact information also if you want to contact us by phone or email. So with that, any last words, Andrew, before we close?
Just wanted to mahalo everyone for taking the time, especially those of you who spent 2 evenings with us on the general plan. So thank you. And we look forward to seeing you folks again in February, if not sooner.
Great. And with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Be safe.